Goodness, Teresa, thank you. My goodness, thank you, thank you. My name's Polly Pistol, and I'm an alcoholic. And by God's grace, in a program called Alcoholics Anonymous, I haven't had a drink since April the 11th of 1977. And for that, I am eternally grateful. I have a home group, and that's the West Connect group in Jacksonville, Florida. And if you're ever in Jacksonville, I just invite you to our home group. It's a very enthusiastic, very active. We are one of the most active groups in Jacksonville. And I just invite you to come see us. I have a sponsor. My sponsor has a sponsor, and I sponsor, and the women I sponsor. And I am an active member of the Rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous. So that is kind of my credentials. And I am so honored to be at this meeting. And I've always loved Teresa. I've known Teresa ever since the first, I've known her. I know who she is. I've heard her speak, but we got to meet and begin to know each other at the first Woodstock West. So I love Teresa, and I just thank you so much, darling, for inviting me. And we just had Ralph in Jacksonville. So that was a really delightful thing. And Ralph is on here, and I'm looking at this gallery, and I just have to say I have some of my favorite people on here. I just can't get over this. I have some women I sponsor, I have some friends, and I have the woman I consider a spiritual leader in my life, and that's Mildred. And I just got to hear her on Sunday, and I loved it because she was talking about one of the things. She says, everybody doesn't do this, but I meditate 20 minutes twice a day. Now, I know for sure that she did that when the weekend I stayed with her, because I did it with her. So I know that. And it just absolutely just makes my heart smile. And I love step 11. And one of the things I'd kind of like to do is talk just briefly about my journey, my spiritual journey I'm going to talk about on awakening too, Teresa. But Teresa said pray about it, and I prayed before I came, and that's kind of what came to me, is the spiritual journey that I've had from a very fundamental religion to where I am today. And I started off by being raised in a Southern Baptist church in Texas. And so I started off with a God who I thought was very angry and very punishing. And I was just a little girl, and I would hear these preachers. They'd get up behind the podium, and their faces would be red, and their veins were sticking out, and they were screaming things like, "You're born a sinner, you're going to burn in hell," and all of these things. And I just always felt, and I always had that feeling, because, that I think is inside all of us who are mentally and bodily different from our fellows. Whatever that something is that just makes me feel different from the rest of the world. And I can remember when I came into Alcoholics Anonymous, and I said, "Oh, I just feel so different." And my first sponsor looked at me and said, "Honey, you are different. That's why you feel different." And we're different. The book says I am mentally, bodily different from my fellows. So I always had this feeling inside of me. So of course, when it came to spirituality or religion was what that was. When it came to religion, I never measured up. And not only that, I was in the Baptist church, and one of the things that was screamed also was, "Thou shalt not drink." And I didn't till 18. And when I was 18 years old, I took my first drink, and I married an Air Force officer, and I took my first drink. I was 18 when I married him. I took my first drink at an officer's wife's luncheon. It was a very wussy drink. It was sherry, but I can tell you to this day, that drink is implanted in my brain. I can remember that drink. I remember how it felt. I remember how warm it was. I remember just being able to take a breath. And I had two little boys. My husband was gone for years at a time. He was a bomber pilot. This was during the Vietnam War. He was gone for years at a time, and I had these two little boys in my care. And what happened for me is I became a very abusive mother. I would throw my kids into the wall. I would hit them. I would scream at them. I was very abusive, physically and mentally and emotionally. And the other thing is I was very neglectful. And what happened by the time my oldest son was 10, I could no longer put my children to bed, and I could no longer get them up in the morning. They had to get themselves up for school. They had to put themselves to bed. I couldn't show up for them. I also had a husband who was 100% disabled from the military. We feel like he was a victim of Agent Orange. We don't know for sure. That was a long time ago. And but he had congestive heart failure at age 36, and his heart was so enlarged that he could hardly breathe and walk. And so he was about 80% bedridden, and my sons had to take care of him. And I just want to put that in there, because what I want to talk about is my journey to God. And one of the things that has happened is my youngest son is 36 years sober in AA. And one of the things that he says, I knew AA worked because it transformed my mother. And that's what I believe has happened. And Marion read that. I feel like because of the rooms at Alcoholics Anonymous and the spiritual journey that I have had has absolutely transformed me from that person who would harm her children, could not take care of her husband. My father was dying 3 hours away in Abilene, Texas, of colon cancer, and I couldn't get there to see him. And I'm his only child. I'm an only child. This is the facts of my life when I came to the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous. And the spiritual journey that I have had in this program. I also feel like that God gives us what we need. God has given me what I need. And one of the things that happened is I ended up in a detox center in Euless, Texas. I lived in Hurst, Texas. We call it mid-cities between Dallas and Fort Worth. And that's where I was in that area. And the director of this detox center had been a priest. He had been a captain in the Navy, and he was an only child. And he ended up 12-stepping me out of a motel in Euless, Texas, and bringing me back into that detox center because I relapsed. And that's a little story all its own, but I'm not going to go into that tonight. And I forgot to start my thing. So anyway, I always do that. When I ended up being, my husband ended up being I ended up trying to take my life because I just couldn't stand who and what I was. Most of all, I couldn't face who and what I was around my children. And what I did is I ended up trying to take my life. That'll get the attention of the authorities. I was carted off to a psychiatric hospital for 72 hours. and I ended up being court committed. And which was enough time for him to get a court order, my husband, to court commit me to treatment. So what has happened since the beginning? I ended up having a friend look for me when I tried to commit suicide, and she said something came over her. I know that was God. She's the one that ended up calling 911. I was 12 stepped out of that motel by the man who would become my first sponsor, and my husband obtained a court order to court commit me to treatment. And what I want to say is God has been working in my life many, many times without my permission. So I know that God is there. I didn't want to go to treatment. I didn't ask to be saved. In fact, I didn't want to be saved, but God has interfered in my life many times and continues to do so. Continues. I pray for God's will, and I truly believe that He interferes and guides me. When I think I need to go this way, I can sit, I can pray, I can do some readings, and the next thing I know, I'm going this way. And God has been directing me for a very long time. Frank had been a priest, and I had a lot of problems with God. I knew there was a God. I knew God was there. I just didn't know God was the God I know today. I didn't know that God was love and compassion. And compassion, the highest form of spirituality, to feel no matter what for another person, to feel that, to feel with them, and not to enable, but to feel and love with them and to care what's going on. Just care. I can't fix, but I can care. And I feel like that through these steps and through the God of my understanding, I have developed some compassion. And I love that. I love to care about what's happening to another person. I like to be able to help and be able to serve. I had a beautiful sponsor by the name of Dottie Harris, and she died 5 years ago, and I had her for 33 years. And Dottie used to always say, the last thing she would say is she would say, honey, I love you, and pray for a servant's heart. And that's what I think about so much. I have a woman today by the name of Rena Kay, and she is an amazing woman, and she has that same grace and beauty that I love so much. The same as my spiritual hero, Mildred. I love that grace and dignity that comes with the love of God. And I call it God. Anybody can call it anything they want, but I call it God. And what Frank did is Frank began to take me through the steps. And I learned so many things from him because he was a priest. And one of the things he also told me is he said, Polly, I did not find God in the Catholic Church, and I'm a priest. I found God in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous. I found a God that loves me no matter what, and knows and does not want to punish me, and he just wants to teach me and love me. That's all he wants to do. And that's the way I feel today. I feel I have been through lots of problems with self-pity and shame. I did more shame to myself the first 3 years I was sober that I brought a lot of shame to myself for what I did to my children. But I brought so much shame to myself in early sobriety because I had a sick husband, and I was having all kinds of affairs and Alcoholics Anonymous. I thought every alcoholic man was just adorable. And I paid a big price for that. I paid a big shame price for that. But what I'm so grateful for is I knew a man when I first got sober. I met him when I was 6 months sober. and became my best friend. But I didn't have an affair with Dave. And when I was 3.5 years sober, Dave came to me and he says, Polly, I don't want to have an affair with you. I want to marry you. And I want you to know, by God's grace and this program that Dave and I have walked together, we will be married on October the 27th, 40 years. And I cannot believe I have been given such a gift. And one of the things that I always loved, and I first learned it from Frank, is I love the 11th step. I'm not going to go through all the steps. I'm going to stick with the 11th step. Sought through prayer and meditation to improve my conscious contact with God. And one of the things that I love, and I really love, I try to carry it on too, and I know Mildred carries it on, and she carries on the thing that Chuck always said, that we all have just one problem, and that's conscious separation from God and man. And what I'm here to do is make conscious contact with God and man. And as the years have gone by, I don't know that I've gotten any more sophisticated with step 11. I just know that I have become more disciplined with step 11, and I am consistent, and I have a whole regiment of what I do in the morning. And I'm going to do that, and then I'm going to talk about some other things about the step. But I'm going to kind of talk about something that I've been doing since I got sober. And there's a couple of things that I do that every single morning. One of the things that I have done of late, and this has been going on for the last 5 years, most of the time I wake up and I open my eyes. I thank God that I'm still here. That's one of the, I'm like so amazed. I'm here. Good morning, I'm here. And I'm going to grab my stuff, and I have different places. Right now I'm out on a patio in the condo I live in. I always have a little spot that I go to, and that's where my spot is today. And now I've had another thing that I say first before I get out of bed, gather up my stuff, and go sit down. And that is, I thank God for my health, because my husband is very ill, and he has been for the past 5 years, and I'm his caregiver. And I pray every day that I continue to have good health so that I can care for my husband. And you see, I love, Dottie used to talk about we get to be able to have corrections. We get to repeat for correction. All of the stuff that we did along the way that we're ashamed for, that we're sorry for, God gives us an opportunity, or at least he's given me an opportunity to repeat for correction. I could not take care of my 2 boys. I couldn't care for them. And so what happened is God has given me 5 grandchildren. And I'm a fun grandma. Now they're all grown now, but I at different times have kept my grandchildren. And their parents would leave me with these kids and go off on vacations, leave me with their children. No forgiveness, and nothing like the forgiveness I have been given from my 2 sons. I am so blessed that I have been given so much forgiveness. At any rate, and the other thing that's repeat for correction is I never could take care of my first husband. I was so selfish and self-centered. I was incapable of caring for him. And today, I get to care for my husband. And not only do I get to care for him, it's an honor. It's a privilege. It's a privilege that I get to do it. And I'm so grateful that I have been given that kind of grace, given the grace that I have been given. And what I do is I go sit down, and there's a couple of things that I've never quit reading. And I pick up different books along the way. But there's one book, besides the big book, I say the 3rd step prayer and the 7th step prayer every morning, and I say the 11th step prayer. And what happened, I've changed other books along the way, but what I've never changed since I got sober was reading Around the Year with Emmett Fox and the big book. And I even use and say Emmett Fox because Emmett Fox was such a huge contributor to the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. And his spirituality speaks to me. And it has, just like the big book, has spoke to me ever since I've gotten sober. I was introduced with that by Frank. He introduced me to that book, and I have had it at my side. I've had many copies of it along the way, because they just get ragged and tattered. And I've had those opportunities to have those books and read it. And I've changed different spiritual readings along the way. And one of the things that I do on Awakening, I try to do, as far as I'm concerned, when we retire, I'm going to do 2 things. One of the things I call the 10th step for me, so that I can kind of keep 10 and 11 separate. I call 10 the 24/7 step. That's the one I'm going to do all day long. And when, I'm going to do the 10th step, and when I'm going to, at once, I'm going to try to make amends. I'm going to take a quick inventory. Well, I'm going to take a quick inventory. If I can't get a hold of my sponsor, I can usually get a hold of a sobriety sister or somebody I sponsor. I have no problems with talking, I walk shoulder to shoulder with the women I sponsor. So I don't have any trouble calling someone I sponsor and say, can I read a quick inventory to you, and do that and make amends at once. And then at night, when I lay down at night, I do a nightly inventory. I review my day, and then I try to see, did I leave anything out on when I went, in that 10th step. And then on Awakening, let us think about the 24 hours ahead. And that's what I do. I sit, this is my little paper of stuff I write down. I use this. I use one of these yellow pads that I write down. On Awakening, let me think about the 24 hours ahead. So I have everything. Do I have those doctor's appointments down? I have a list of the call-ins of the women I sponsor who do their call in on whichever day they call in on, and I have that down, and I have the things that I can do. Now I need this list more than ever because I'm older and I don't remember so well. So those are the things that I'm trying to keep myself aware of. So because if not, I'm gonna forget. And so we consider our plans for the day before we begin. Now I do that. I know that I have certain people that are going to call. If Dave has a doctor's appointment and I cannot make that appointment, it's my responsibility to call and say, I'm so sorry, I can't make that call. I had a friend that called me today who's become a really good friend in Alcoholics Anonymous, and I couldn't get to that phone call today. Now that will be one of my first phone calls tomorrow, is to call him, because he's a friend and I don't want to not do that. I want to be accountable to return phone calls. I think that that's a really important thing for me to do, is to not ignore phone calls. But I also know that the women I have scheduled to talk deserve my time first. And that's what I do. So also with my list, I have to prioritize. Always the first thing that is important is, what do I have to do with Dave today? What are my responsibilities to him? Does he have a doctor's appointment? Do I need to help him get ready for that appointment? What do we need to do? So that's what we consider. consider my plans before I begin. We ask God to direct our thinking. That's my prayer. Help me, especially being asked to be divorced from self-pity, dishonesty, or self-seeking motives. Now, I can tell you, sometimes I have to kind of prod Dave on, come on, we got to get dressed, we got to go, we got to do this. And I just hate to be a nag and say we have to do this, but I know that this is my responsibility. That's what I'm supposed to do. And I just ask God for me not to be short with him and not too bossy, because I can be a little bit bossy, and I have to remember that this is my husband. And so I have to say a little prayer. God, help me. I am forever praying for patience, And so that's one of the, I just always say that little prayer. I just ask God to direct my thinking and help me be divorced from self-pity. Because I'll be honest with you, when Dave first got sick 5 years ago, my whole life changed too. I was running all over the world, really, doing things I love. And I can't do that anymore. And a little part of me had a lot of self-pity about that. But I'll tell you one thing, I'm running all over the world right now, and I don't even have to get on an airplane. And it's absolutely fabulous. So I think it's horrible that we have COVID-19, but I love Zoom. I'm getting to see people that I don't normally get to see. I get to hear people I don't normally get to hear. I got to bring Ralph to my home group. How about that? It's a meeting in Jacksonville, Florida, and I had Ralph White speaking at my home group. That's what you get to do when you have Zoom. It's amazing. So, but I did have self-pity. I had a lot of self-pity because I knew that my life had changed too. But thanks to these steps, and thanks to prayer, and thanks for guidance from a sponsor, and all the help I get from the women I sponsor, I have realized that I have a privilege, and that self-pity has drifted away from me. And today I see that what I get to do is an honor. Okay. Under these conditions, we can employ our mental faculties. I can sit down, I can read, I can pick out something, I can do whatever. Maybe I need to read something different because of where I'm at today. I have all kinds of books. I'm a big fan of Chuck Chamberlain. I've read a lot of stuff that he does. I read a lot of stuff that Sandy's had. And a lot of the spiritual giants I've loved in Alcoholics Anonymous. I read a lot of their stuff. I may listen to a CD. I may I may go and get something on my phone and put the earplugs in and walk around and do whatever I have to do. Whatever I need to do to get right, I try to get right, because my day can get hard and I can get short-tempered. And I don't want to do that. I don't want to do that. With assurance, for after God gave us brains to use. Our thought life, and this is a promise. I love this promise. Our thought life will be placed on a much higher plane when our thinking is cleared of wrong motives. And I can tell you, I can get all kinds of ideas in my head, and I don't need them there. And one of the things that I do is also on my little yellow pad is I do not believe God wants me sideways with anybody. I mean, I don't believe that God wants me sideways. And one of the things that I want to just quickly say, how many minutes do I have? I forgot to set my thing. Do I have about 10?
13.
13, okay, thank you. One of the things there's two things I want to talk about before I finish. But one of the things that I had happened to me 2 years ago is I got the worst resentment. I had felt very betrayed. I felt something was taken from me that I loved with all my heart. I had put my heart and soul in it, and I felt that it was taken from me, and I had this huge resentment. And I knew that I cannot, the book tells me I cannot have these feelings. It'll just chew you up and eat you up. And I hadn't had a resentment like that in years and years and years. And I was inventorying and talking to Rena. Oh my gosh, I've got a sponsee on this meeting that I was talking to constantly. And I was talking to her. I mean, it was just absolutely eating my soul, eating my soul. And what happened was, and this has just been in the last 6 months, maybe even less. This is how soon I have come through this resentment. I've done the work. I kept doing the work, and I'd get a little relief, and then here'd come the wave again and hit me and knock me over again. And I'd get all that icky stuff going on again. And I was just sitting in meditation. I'm not a really good meditator, but I always have a quiet time. I always write some things down, and I sit and I just pray. And that day, something just came over me, just absolutely washed over me. And what came into my head and what I saw so clearly is how abusive a mother I had been to my two little boys, and how they have forgiven me, have forgiven me. And all of a sudden I thought, I did 1,000 times worse to my little boys than this person ever did to me. How could I not forgive this person? And resentment was just washed away. And I thank God every day for it to be removed. I haven't stopped thanking him because I haven't gotten another wave. So I just keep thanking God that that resentment has been removed. Next thing I'd like to talk about in the time I have left is the prayer of St. Francis. I love this prayer. I read this prayer every morning, and this prayer speaks to me, and I am so grateful that it's part of our literature, because I had never heard of this prayer before I came to Alcoholics Anonymous, and I absolutely love it. Lord, make me a channel of thy peace. That's what I want to be. I don't want to be full of resentment. I don't want to be full of hate. I don't want any of that. I want to be a clear channel. And I feel like one of the greatest gifts that I've been given in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous is I have been able to sponsor women, and I have remained sponsorable. And I feel like that is a gift. And I'm grateful that I have people in my life that will help me keep that channel clear. And I ask God, let me be a channel of thy peace. And sometimes maybe one of my sponsees has to call me on something. And I feel like that's one of the things I'm really big on, is walking shoulder to shoulder. That where there is hatred, I may bring love. That where there is wrong, I may bring a spirit of forgiveness. And what happened was, until I could reach that place of forgiveness with this resentment I had, and I can see, sometimes I think sometimes we get to experience things, so I don't forget that that's the number one offender, that that's the thing that's going to cut me off from the sunshine of the Spirit. If I'm sideways with any of God's kids, I am going to be cut off from the sunshine of the Spirit. I have got to have a clear channel. That where there is discord, I may bring harmony. And one of the things that my very first sponsor told me, Holly, you can tell anybody the truth if you tell it with love. But if you do it with anger, people can't hear you. They can't hear you. All I can say is just, I do my best. If I have any discard with anybody, is to ask God how I can approach this with love, because I know that that's where I have to come from. And one of the gifts I today can be so grateful for is that my parents, I didn't even understand this until I had quite a few years of sobriety, but the greatest gift my parents gave me was the gift of love. I was given the gift of love, and I didn't even understand it when I was being loved. I was so cherished as a child, and I didn't even know it. And today I am so aware of the love that was given to me. May I bring truth, that where there is doubt, may I bring truth. I try really hard, no matter how hard it is if I have to tell somebody the truth, I pray about it. I ask God to help me be able to tell the truth and to tell it with love. That where there is doubt, I may bring faith. That where there is despair, I may bring hope. And one of the things that happens a lot of times is I get to sponsor women who have been child abusers like me, or have been very abused children. And one of the things that I can help them with, especially if they're have been very abused children, when they're doing a fifth step with me, or if they're reading any kind of inventory and it has to do with their parents, I usually can put my arms around this woman and say, I was your mother. That's who I was. But because of the program of Alcoholics Anonymous, I'm not that woman anymore. I'm not her anymore. I know she sits here. I know she's here. And I know that I have to work this program as hard as I can work it. I have to be of as much service as I can be. I can never let up. The book tells me I can never let up on the spiritual program. I have to work this program diligently at all times. And I only get a daily reprieve. I can't rest on my laurels. Whatever good I did yesterday, I have to do it again today. I can't lean on that laurel. I have to do something this day. I may bring hope, that where there are shadows, I may bring light. And where there is sadness, I may bring joy. Lord, grant that I may seek rather to comfort than to be comforted. Help me to be relieved of the bondage of self, and let me be a channel to you. Let me reach out to another person and give them this program. The greatest gift we can give is to share our experience, strength, and hope with another person. I am so grateful that I get that experience. There's nothing like it. There's nothing in the world that makes me feel more useful and more whole than to be able to work with one of the women that I sponsor, or anybody, male or female, when I get the opportunity to share what has been given to me in this program, and they share with me what's been given to them. To understand than to be understood. That was one of the things I used to say all the time. You don't understand me. Well, you know, your job isn't to understand me. I can definitely remember what Chuck said. Chuck, my God taking care of me is God's business. Taking care of God's kids is my business. It is not you don't need to understand me. I need to understand you. God will take care of understanding me. to love than to be loved. For it is in the self-forgetting that one finds. It is the forgiving that one is forgiven. What happened is, it kind of worked the opposite with my little resentment that I had. Because what washed over me that day is how my sons had forgiven me. Because I was having trouble forgiving. I had a hard time forgiving. And what happened is, because my sons had forgiven me so much, I was able to forgive. It is by dying that one awakens to eternal life. And I truly believe that that's exactly what we read in the spiritual experience. It is in the dying that we are awakened to a new life, and we are transformed to this way of life in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous. Thank you.